Good morning. Welcome to WayFinders. Jeff Clark, Heather Laux, Randall Hogue. And we're going to give a quick explanation of our roles here. I've decided this is like a ship, a sail, and I'm the keel because I keep us from going too far one way or the other. And we've decided that Heather's the rudder because she's always taken us wherever.
In new directions.
Yes. And Randall, you're the sails because
the power of the wind.
We want to bring the energy
of the wind
to move us forward.
Of breath.
Yeah.
I'm all about going forward.
And I didn't want to say whether it was hot air or anything like that, but
Cool air is better.
okay. So welcome.
I'll just go with breath.
And that fits with what we're talking about today because we're talking about spirituality, and Heather's going to start us off in the proper direction.
Well, I think you can tell this is my favorite subject. I think you can pretty much tell that. And why is it my favorite subject? Because it's just so beautiful. It's so glorious. My spirit is so glorious that I just have so much fun with her all the time. And him.
Okay.
Yeah. So we want to talk about that awareness. We were talking about your awareness of who you are.
Well,
what is your spirit?
In spiritual awareness, I mean, most people have a way of knowing and being in contact with their own spirituality, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. And this is not about being Jewish or Catholic or Muslim or anything else. Your spirituality, being in contact with the greater you, mm-hmm. or with your higher self, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Right. According to Spirituality for Dummies,
love it.
Spiritual knowledge is that it realigns your sense of self to something you may not have even imagined was within you. Spirituality says that even if you think you're small and limited, it simply isn't so.
True. We came here to do great things. Yes.
And
we
it's
all
part
did.
of awareness of being something, part of a bigger whole, being a part of everything that exists. Like going back into, you know, the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of talk about how there's an energy center that's involved in every piece of matter, every piece of energy, mm-hmm.
everything
that exists, including thought,
mm-hmm.
and including a lot of other things. So the spiritual awareness and being aware of your own spirituality and the spirituality of everything that exists and part of the whole, two different parts.
So the law of oneness.
Yeah.
The law of one. Everything is one.
And it's one and the same.
Yes, and everything is energy. Everything is made of energy. Sometimes you can see it, sometimes it's more dense, like here, or sometimes it's the sun. Yeah, you can see the sun, you can feel the heat, but can you get there? Not really.
Don't think so.
Not really.
Yeah. It's kind of like, in our case, it's like a tesseract. Tesseract is something that's an object where the inside and the outside are both the same.
Yeah.
So you follow it and you go inside, but you're actually going to the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And it has different surfaces. If you follow the surface like an infinity symbol,
mm-hmm.
and you're following the curve and you're on the outside, when you come back around, you're actually on the inside.
Yes.
And then it goes back. Well, in spirituality, it's the same way. You're part of this big whole,
Mm-hmm.
and that big whole is part of you.
Mm-hmm.
So getting in touch
Mm-hmm.
with that, and almost every religion that I can think of talks about it. Every single one of them talks about it at length.
Yes.
You know, I mentioned last week that I was reading a book called Aristotles Way, and I finished it. The last chapter is on mortality, and fittingly, his writings were late in his life when he was living in exile, but his writing about God essentially said that we are the closest to God when we are putting our thoughts into action. That it is that capacity that people have to actually come up with a concept, conceive an idea, and then enact it. That's the closest we get to divinity.
I love how you said that, because I can see the masculine and the feminine within each of us uniting as one. Your feminine side is your intuition, that creativity that comes up, and your masculine side brings it into action, brings it into the world. So it's a wonderful marriage that you just created of a human being, no matter whether you be male or female.
And that leads us right to the next part of the chapter.
Yes, it does.
How
Which
about
was
that?
Communicating your spirituality. How, like he just
How do you do
expressed.
it? Yeah.
How do you communicate your spirituality in your living space, in your community, with yourself, with anything that you come in contact, or anyone that you come in contact with? How do you communicate your spirituality? How do you do it, Heather?
Just like this. Just like this.
Meaning?
Don't you feel it?
I really just shine my light. I have a very big practice, and I've been doing it for most of my life. And I'm just really coming back into that innocence of that practice, of that me, of that my best self that got kind of left behind when I was a young girl. And I think that happens to everybody. When we go to school, when we, with our parents, whether they be our adversaries or our allies, it doesn't matter. They still are conditioned themselves. So they're going to teach you the same things that they learned. Mm-hmm. And what if it was not to it didn't resonate with you? So most of mine didn't resonate with me. But I had a knowing inside of me that all is well. That it's all light, and it's all on purpose, and it's all in a divine plan. And if you just stay on your plan, you'll be fine. Yeah, there's suffering. Yeah, because we're human, and we get into our minds, and we let our minds take over our whole being, and that's not our spirit. So I don't know, I kind of think of our spirit as who's listening to my mind talking, who's hearing the words that other people speak before they speak them.
Well, speaking of words, it's one way. Some people do it through art. Some people communicate their spirituality through music.
Creative endeavors.
There are a lot of ways to communicate it and to get it out there. But we were talking about also is...
You do it through history.
There's a need to do it. Human beings have a need to do it. If they learn something new, they want to give it a name so they can communicate it.
Yes.
If they have an experience, they want to express it. And if they don't, they're stifling their spirituality by not communicating it. Mm-hmm. It's an essential part of life.
I think you lose it if you don't share it.
Yeah. So some people do it with their artwork.
Yes.
Like Jeff.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. How does communicating through your art?
You mentioned, I think it was last week or recently when we were talking about things, a book called The Aristotles Way.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was not familiar with it. And I did a little research, so I decided to go to the library. A good source for finding things out, by the way.
Excellent source.
And I sat there and I went through the book. And I don't need to buy it. Because
I like that.
the principles,
Bookstores not going to make a lot of money on
No,
it.
but I felt very fortunate that the principles that she puts forth as far as being safe in your creativity, as far as having confidence, as far as, whatever some of the other points were, I grew up with that.
Yes.
And so, I'm an artist. I've been doing art since I was a little kid. And, that's just comfortable for me.
You were allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
You were
fun.
encouraged to.
So what are some of all the ways?
Yeah, because it kept me quiet.
Hey.
Hey, go draw something, Jeff. Go ahead.
Well, it kept you inside of you.
Yeah.
And you were coming inside of you, putting it on the outside
I
was
was
the
always
action.
perfectly fine with that.
Yeah. We are.
We can communicate it, as you're saying, through art, through music, through the spoken word, through poetry and prose. Are there other ways that we can communicate
That's my
our
phone.
spirituality to other people, or to to fulfill the need to communicate.
How do we deal with the turmoil and trouble we are faced with every day? How do we find the personal strength to move our lives forward against the many headwinds that seem to conspire against us? It isn't a secret, it's simply a journey, and that's life. Our goal is to help you map out your personal path to a complete concept of who you are and want to be. The thing is, this project requires money. We can't do it without help. So we're going to reward your support with access to a variety of sources and provide discounts on programs. Go to www.communitymediaservice.com and send us $20 to make the initial friend list, or give $50 and you'll be placed on the special friend list for ongoing benefits. Help us make this happen. Help yourself, help others. Join us on this special project. Go to www.communitymediaservice.com and click your choice, either $20 or $50, and stay tuned for more. So we just had a brief little break because Heather's alarm went off. You want to tell us about that?
My alarm, I started my alarm about, quite a few years ago. It was at a Unity church out in Arizona or something. And everybody was putting they had cards. They had to mark off if they prayed or they contacted their own spirit every hour. It was a reminder to be aware of yourself. I made it to be like, okay, so who am I? Because I always ask that. Who am I? Who am I really? Who am I? You know, I'm a lot of things. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, you know, I'm a wife, a lot of things. But I'm really just an essence. And so who am I? So I want to bring myself back to that so that I start as on even ground, so to say. And then I ask, all right, so who am I? I'm that essence self, I'm that light. And where am I at? Okay, I'm here. So is that on my purpose? Is that on my divine plan? Yes, it is.
Okay.
Am I teaching? Yes. When I'm in my classes, I have the alarm on. All my students know about it. Oh, it's time to ask ourselves, who am I? And where am I at? And am I on my plan? Am I on my pathway?
Okay.
So those, just to sum it up, the alarm goes off, you set
Every
it
hour.
off like every hour on
From
your
5:30 in
phone,
the morning
on your
till
cell phone,
probably 8 at
so
night.
you have it with you. And at that point, you ask yourself those three questions, right? Which is one way of also keeping in touch with your own spirituality.
Yes.
Those are very good, strong spiritual questions.
Okay, good example then.
Yeah. So let's go to the next thing, which is shining your light. It's the same thing as in a way about
I think
communicating.
Heather just did that.
Yeah.
I love how this works. I love how it flows.
Shining your light to us is, if you're aware of it yourself, that does take away that communication. In other words, you can be in touch with your own spirituality and not share it. And then, let's suppose you have something of value, like we just shared the idea, having the alarm, asking the three questions. We call that getting centered. Getting centered. So the alarm goes off, trying to get centered, let me ask myself those three questions, which is a great way of doing it. But what we just did is we did our next segment here by shining your light. So sharing it is what we're talking about. Sharing that message, or sharing that so other people may learn, profit from it, and maybe have a better life from it, which is what we're doing here with the program.
Exactly.
But it's another essential to being human is sharing things that you have of value.
Right.
You have a need to do that.
Yeah, I think there is a deep need inside of us to share what works for us.
So we just did our good deed for the day.
Yay!
Way
Now we can go to traditional religions, which is something that...
cool.
Well,
I love all religions. I really do.
and one of the things I find here, this is from Psychology Today, spirituality and religious affiliation aren't necessarily simultaneous or synonymous. And yet you don't have to. A lot of people have that misconception that to be spiritual,
Is religious, yes.
yeah, you have to go back to, like the early Christian interpretations of that, which, was just one interpretation. And if you look at all the other religions, I brought in a list.
Beautiful list.
Which, covers traditional, which is the classical,
traditional,
contemporary. It also includes African spiritual. It includes all the religions, and spiritual experience, spiritual practices.
Oh, and this was from Wikipedia.
Yeah. So that's what Wikipedia thinks about.
And if you take away the conventional establishments of these different religions and get down to the core of their message, the core of the messages of all of them are pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The basic structural core of it, going back thousands of years. A lot of times religions, a new religion is actually borrowing a lot of things from previous religions, going back to the beginning, wherever and whenever that was.
Yeah. And treat others as you would wish to be treated, which goes back to the oneness.
And the laws of the universe.
Yeah. That
The
if
universal
you're doing
laws of
that,
love.
then things work better than if you're not.
Yes, they do. They see, yes, because it is a natural flow. There's certain laws that are immutable. They're not changeable.
You've got a lot of them we
I
were
do.
looking at earlier.
Yeah, I do have a lot of them. I love the universal laws of love. They're what makes my world make sense to me.
There's an analogy here that's interesting. They were talking about the 7 tribes of Israel, and one of the tribes got lost.
Yeah.
And someone started a rumor that one of the tribes ended up in what is now the United States. Okay? And they actually were one of the Cherokee tribes. So the Cherokee Indians was one of the original 7 tribes of Israel that
Nice.
ended up here. And he was going to prove it. So he went to a powwow and he wrote down everything that the Native Americans were saying. And they were chanting around the fire and they were dancing around the fire. And he wrote down all the different phonetic words and what have you what he's saying. Turned out to be a direct translation of a chant from the Kabbalah from ancient times in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I think we just
Amazing.
got-
A
yes.
direct translation, which is pretty amazing.
Thank you.
So yeah, maybe there is something to how some parts of different religions are brought over from the rest. Something that's basically human.
And we're going to be bringing in some people, leaders from the community that
Right.
are of different religions. I think we said Christian,
Yeah,
Jewish,
yeah.
and
Hindu,
Ascended Master.
You can go back to Hindu, Buddhism, all of the messages are all the same. There are a lot of people today that have analyzed the original writings in the New Testament, actual quotes from Jesus Christ, and said, he must have been a Buddhist. Because
Well-
it fits right in.
Yes.
And actually, it fits in because the messages are universal.
Absolutely.
Yes.
They really are universal.
And they're based in truth, universal truth, not relative truth, not 3D truth.
So there really is no reason for one person to have a problem with someone else's religion,
No,
as long as that religion does no harm,
exactly.
Right.
okay? That's part of it.
No harm to self, no harm to another.
But they may actually all have the same origin, all of them.
Well, and
I
there are
like to
certainly
think
similarities,
that's
yes.
true.
Yeah,
That-
enough similarities that it's not just coincidence.
Yeah, we were talking about the last time, we were talking about like the Great Flood. And the Great Flood goes back in translation to ancient Egypt. It goes back into ancient Samaria. It goes back into the Old Testament. It's almost as if all these civilizations that never even spoke to each other had the same origin story or had the same migration story. It's actually universal.
Yep.
I love how the universal laws of love have come through purely from all time. I was watching something on Gaia TV the other day, and they were talking about how history, how it changes within 100 years, the amount of history that's the truth now. Where did you get it from? You know, did you get it from the winning side of the war, or did you get it from the other side? So did you get the right perspective, and did you mix those two? So they were kind of talking about how history, how can you know it's true if
Winners write the
exactly
story.
how can you really know it's true? So by the time 100 years passes, how do we even know that that's true? But these universal laws of love, they've come through eons. They've come through all time. And the same. They've been the same in every religion and every teachings. I like that.
What was the
I
quote?
like some
that
consistency, some foundation there.
we're talking about history, and the quote going back to what is the part of reality that's real is the part that never changes. The part that changes,
Yes.
rust on middle and all these different things that happen, flowers that wilt and all that. You see that as reality, but it's transient. And because it changes, it's not the real reality. The real reality is that which never changes. All religions say the same thing. The real reality is that which never changes.
And everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything is always in flux.
So those are all
What a paradox.
like symptoms or extensions of reality, but the real reality is the base core, and all religions say the
Okay,
same
but
thing.
I was telling Heather a little bit ago that in Aristotle's philosophy, and this goes back to mortality, is that the reason that we have all of these cycles, God or whatever, is eternal, and that is the one eternal truth. And so by creating and recreating ourselves first, and children, and in nature, flowers and plants and trees, and and there's a cycle. It's the same cycle. Why is that? And
Over and over and over again.
His answer to that is that is the closest we get to come to eternal, because people come before us who are basically the same as us, and we can keep them in our memories, and we can project things in the future. But that's how, we get to be close to eternal.
Just like going on a path of self-discovery, and when you get to your destination, you're back where you started.
Yes.
Because, but all of these religions and all these human race and everything else, they follow this path through their own course of religions, whatever they may be. The paths are all very similar, and then they find out that they all have the same meaning when they get to that destination.
Okay, and throughout the whole journey, we're not supposed to be thinking about what happened.
Because you'll be depressed or frustrated.
And we're not supposed to spend too much
Because
focus
you get
on the
anxious.
future.
Anxious.
We're
Yes.
supposed to be in the present.
Be here now.
Yes, and we can go back to the same three questions that you asked earlier when we were talking about the alarm goes off and you ask yourself, what was it? Who am I?
Who am I?
Where am I?
Where am I at?
Yeah.
And am I on my divine plan
So you see,
Or path.
or path?
all of those paths and all of those experiences go along the same route, which
Yes.
leads us to the next section, which is
To the last
being
one.
here now,
Well, okay.
right?
Yeah.
In being here now, it's a quote from a Baba Ram Dass book going back to 1968, I think, somewhere in that time period. And it means the alarm goes off and you ask those three questions, right? That's pretty much the core of the book. And being fully present, if you're carrying water or chopping wood or whatever, you're paying attention to that. You're not being absent-minded,
No multitasking.
where you might end up missing with your axe or
Yeah.
falling down a hill or what have you. So being aware, being present, and
Mindful. They have a lot of words nowadays. Being
Yeah.
mindful.
But it continues to come back to awareness.
Yes.
It's just, being aware of yourself, your situation.
Your feelings about that.
Yeah.
Your thought patterns.
And so that's why part of what we're trying to do is encourage people to be aware and spend some time figuring out, where am I? Who am I? Because that's very relevant thought. And if you can think through some of those things, then you can better say, this is my path.
and
This is
being
where I wanna
aware of
go.
your goal. For example, if you're chopping wood or carrying water or whatever, you're seeing how it has a function, and you're doing it for a purpose. So your goal is to have wood to have fire or cook your food or have water or whatever. Anything in life, being aware of it, if you have awareness of the goal and you know whether what you're doing is on the path to that
Having
goal,
purpose.
you have to have that purpose and that goal. You have to have some understanding of
So
where
how do you find it? So maybe this is where we're here to help people find it, because we're wayfinders.
That's
So
right.
how do you find it? How
That's
did
what-
you
that's
find it?
what
How
was
did
going
I
to
find
ask.
it?
Right,
Well, and for the good of all
yeah.
Yes,
is part of that.
yes, it is.
How can or what can I do that I want to do, that I feel good about doing, that fits me, but also
It's
is
good for everyone.
beneficial?
Yes.
You know, because it's not like, okay, I like to shoot guns and I like money, so I'm going to go rob a bank or something. That's not beneficial.
Yeah.
You know, in order to be on the right path, I mean, yeah, you can be on the wrong path, and people do that all the time, but in order to get on the right path,
On your path, yeah, your
Yes.
unique
you know,
right
it
path
has
for
to
you.
be, you know, it's a positive energy. It's the, you know, and the more the communities and individuals come together, you create that positive energy,
Yeah.
which helps you achieve more.
Yeah, I'm thinking that for me, for the good of all, and we were talking about a lot of these other ones like communication of your spirituality, everything else. For the good of all, like what we're doing here and doing the program and putting it out there so that people can
Yes.
hear from it, learn from it, get some message from it. Maybe someone will get something out of any one of these things that we
Anything.
did
Even
on this
a
program.
moment of peace and that inner knowing and that joyfulness of themselves. That's all I really look for.
And
So-
then they've got to do something about it.
What?
Got to do something
That's
about
their
it.
choice. That's their choice. Yeah, that's
We
the
were
free will
feeling
choice.
like doing this program is part of us fulfilling
Yes.
our effort to provide some of this for the good of all. So we're going to come back next week and we're going to talk about, in our next
I
chapter,
think we're talking
Health.
about health, right?
we're talking about health. And again, we're going to go into the 6 different parts, like we did today, a little bit more in depth on each one. And then when you go to the website, you're going to be able to look it up and see more and more
Yes.